Washington has taken on a top 10 FCS team in UC Davis. It's time for some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes with me over at Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the days. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. Just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, by the way, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, make sure to click that subscribe button down below. Click the little bell as well so you never miss when we post a new show. And if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the channel out a lot. Now, Lars, we got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers out there today, where it's one of our favorites. It's time for a pregame preview show where Washington's taking on UC Davis. Got our bold predictions, your score prediction coming up at the very end, some defensive keys to the game. But as always, we start on the offensive side. So as you look at this matchup with UC Davis, your number one key to the game is
that UC Davis secondary early and often. When you look at what they did in the first couple of games, really, let's just call it last week, because that Mercer game, I don't really know what to call it. So we just
it was a football game. Hey, let's be real though. They played really well in that game against a good FCS team on the road, but because of the lightning and everything, it's very hard to talk about it.
Exactly. But when you look at both of those games in totality, they have a pretty good secondary. And I think obviously, when you say FCS ranks, you look at a couple of guys that UW has, gone after over the past couple of years. Big Sky, Alex McLaughlin comes to mind, Cameron Broussard. There's a lot of talent at that level. And so for me, Drew Caulfield is one guy where ranks, I believe, the number one defensively on PFF for UC Davis. That would be a matchup, especially with Denzel Boston, where, go test it, go prove it, get ahead by 21, 28 points going into, let's say the third quarter, conservatively. That should have happened last week. It didn't. This is now the week to get it right.
So I couldn't agree with you more. That's the number one thing for me, where when we look at this game, the one thing that there wasn't a whole ton, but the ones that did happen were glaring. It's avoid the self-inflicted mistakes, penalties, the bad step, all that sort of stuff. Whatever it is, you had an opportunity to start to get those things right against Colorado State. And, to an extent, you still did that. Jonah Coleman obviously was tremendous. There were still a lot of things that did go right in that game. But as Jedd Fisch said during his Thursday press conference, we want to make sure we're improving every single week and cleaning up everything we possibly can in every single area. Now, yes, I know that is, coach speak 101, but it's true. It really is. And there are so many things that go into that, where I look at this Washington offense and, to bring it back to what we were talking about on yesterday's show, this trio of stars, this is a game where, again, UC Davis is no slouch of an FCS team. They're a top 10 team in terms of those rankings. So there are still, you have to be physical. You have to do all these things to win the game. And early on, at least, you are going to have to get the ball into the hands of your star players. Denzel Boston, Jonah Coleman. We'll see how many runs they want to dial up for Demond Williams in the first half and everything like that. But I look at this game and it's no self-inflicted mistakes, and don't take them lightly. I feel like this is, the best way to put it, because again, as we look at this matchup, as you said, there's a lot of talent that UC Davis has just overall. They have this ranking for a reason. And one of the things that I think needs to show up in this game, especially when you talk about getting the ball into your star players' hands, it's establish your physicality when you're running the football, where, it's one of those games where if you look at Jonah Coleman and he has, let's just call it 12 carries for 85 yards in the first half, you're happy with that. That is a really solid half of football. And if the game goes the way, we might expect, to just hint at your score prediction there, I think that this is one of those things where you're going to just look back at the first half and say, okay, yeah, that looked really great. And then in the third and fourth quarters, you're able to start rotating in some more guys and just, really developing your program for the long term.
I like that a lot. I think kind of everything encompasses stay on target, stay on time, in terms of when you're talking about continuing drives and things like that. UC Davis obviously going to make you earn it, at least I would say, for the first quarter and a half, and then ideally
they're going to make you earn it for all four quarters, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I'm just saying, in terms of UW, when you look at the talent difference, especially in the trenches, the way the offensive line performed against Colorado State, and you look at how average, let's just say at best, UC Davis' line is, where I think their strength on defense is, call it the back seven, with the linebackers in the secondary. that's an area where you should be able to establish yourself, stay on rhythm. You shouldn't be into 3rd and 5 or more. You should be in 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, if at all. And I think that for me is another one. Make it count on 3rd down. If you get into 3rd down, again, when you talk about an FCS team, you shouldn't really have a ton of 3rd down attempts in general. But if you're going to, make sure you're 4 or 5 on 3rd down, 3 or 4 on 3rd down, whatever it happens to be. You're not going to be 6 or 7 or 7 or 8. That's just asking too much. But that's also a concern if you get to that many 3rd down attempts. So for me, I think one thing that if we want to talk about a cause for concern a little bit, was I think there were 3 for 7, 3 for 8 on 3rd down, or at least for the early majority of that game against Colorado State. They might have got a couple wins late. But to me, that was also another area where I looked and said, man, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, if that's still a problem, this is going to go a lot differently. So this is a game to kind of get right in that respect.
So I disagree a little bit because, just to kind of bring it back to the establishing the run and everything like that. If you're getting a 3rd down, but you're consistently keeping it in 3rd and short, which was the problem that this team had last season, where obviously with the struggles on the offensive line, it was a lot harder to establish the run at different points in time and get into consistent 3rd and short scenarios. If you can change that up and run behind the guy I want to talk about here was John Mills, run behind John Mills, Carver Willis, Jurassic Party, who all had 80+ grades from Pro Football Focus last week against Colorado State. Shout out to John Mills, by the way, who's the highest graded true freshman offensive lineman in the country per PFF. So if you're able to get those guys going early, which, as you said, this is exactly what you're supposed to do against a lower level opponent, is establish your physicality early and get this team moving downhill and just picking up 5-6 yards of play, if at all possible. So as I look at it, this offensive line is going to need to show up again. And one thing I'm really curious about is something that, I asked Jimmy Doherty about it earlier in the week with Colorado State blitzing Demond Williams at a 70.6% clip. I'm curious what that's going to look like this week, where I've seen some people who are still concerned about the offensive line after week 1, saying they allowed too much pressure. When Colorado State was sending so many 6-man blitzes, Demond, I believe, did the best he could. I know Jimmy Doherty was happy with the way that he performed as well in the face of all that pressure. What I'm curious about is, as you said, UC Davis certainly trusts the back end of this defense. If they want to send a similar pressure rate, I don't think it's going to be 70%, mind you, but if it's 55%, just to try to get Demond off his rhythm and try to, see if your coverage can hold up on the back end for an extra second or two while Demond needs to, roll out and try to hit a receiver or anything like that. That's something I'm really interested in, because this is something where, to look down the road a couple of weeks to Washington State as well, with Jimmy Rogers, a very defensive-minded head coach at Wazoo. If this becomes just kind of the blueprint of attacking Demond Williams, it's sending extra guys on the rush and forcing him to make a smart decision and see if he holds on to the ball too long. That's the last thing I wanted to mention here was, let's see the improvement from Demond Williams in terms of not taking hits and getting the ball out of his hand quickly. I think those are really, really important things to keep an eye on in this game, because as the season goes on, Jimmy Doherty said it on Tuesday, he doesn't want to see Demond take, those hits where he's going head on against the safety. He wants to see him slide, get out of bounds, different things like that. And that all starts in the backfield, where it's maybe he throws the ball away a little bit more if there is pressure in his face for one reason or another.
Yeah, I think that's where Demond truly came into the season, having to improve the most. Jedd talked about his football acumen, football intelligence, and those sorts of things. And it's no knock on Demond, but I think that's part of still only starting 3 games. This is another example where this is going to be his 4th start. You would think at this point he would start to make those improvements on a more consistent basis, and we fully expect he will on Saturday. But for me, it's still like that would be the area of emphasis, if you will, where if you're Demond, don't have any sacks that are truly your fault. If you get overloaded and whatever, just take the sack, do whatever. Don't try and make the hero play. But there were a couple of plays against Colorado State that I think Demond wants back, and this would be a weekend to show.
I couldn't agree with you more, but let's jump over to the defensive side of the ball. Right after a message from our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you ordered, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the Washington Huskies, it's Jonah Coleman. He delivered in a big way. He was just incredible throughout the night. 177 rushing yards against Colorado State, pair of touchdowns. That earned him the Doak Walker National Running Back of the Week award. He came through when the pressure was on. No hesitation, no delay. play. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Jonah Coleman is on a streak that carries over from the 2024 season. And just like Jonah delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. We've also got a message from our good friends over at Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. They follow what moves them every time they drive, and that's what makes Mazda stand out. They go beyond safety, style, and performance to deliver a driving experience that feels alive in every detail. Mazda offers more than safety. It's won more 2025 IAHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. As an athlete focuses on every detail, Mazda does the same, from metallic accents to hand-stitched Napa leather. Whether it's a quick drive to practice or a weekend road trip, Mazda makes even everyday drives feel special. It's the small details that make the big plays, and just like there's more to every player, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Lars, as we jump over to the defensive side of the ball here, I think the number one key is very, very clear. It's keep Caden Pinnick in the pocket. UC Davis is quarterback. For those who were unaware, I did a really fun breakdown of him on a show earlier in the week because I'm really impressed with him. Defensive coordinator Ryan Walters was really impressed with him when we got a chance to talk to him on Tuesday. This is a guy who is really mobile, as Ryan Walters said, makes a lot of smart decisions. And when he's able to get outside the pocket, he can make plays with both his arm and his legs. So there's going to be a lot of emphasis on linebackers and safeties, whether it be as a quarterback spy, which I think we're going to see a fair amount of in this game, or on the defensive line, whether it be, simply getting after him and collapsing the pocket from the interior and playing contain on the edges, or just holding the point of attack and just saying, you're going to stay in the pocket. We're going to force you to beat you with your arm, to beat us with your arm, and utilize our elite secondary with Takario Davis, Ephesians Prasak, whoever's playing nickel between Leroy Bryant and Rashawn Clark, and these safeties that have been really, really impressive. And I think that that's probably going to be the game plan, because as I was saying earlier in the week, if that's more the plan and just keeping Caden Pinnick contained and trying to push the pocket back from the interior while just not letting him escape is the number one plan of attack, I'm more than okay with that.
And within that, because you make a bunch of great points there, one thing that stood out to me was yards after contact as well. He had 28 alone, because again, the Mercer game does and does not count. So in the stats, those yards that he gained in that game don't show up. But it shows even when you try and keep him in the pocket and he gets out, he doesn't go down lightly. He's not a guy that would just, kind of slide and call it even. The fact that you have a quarterback with nearly 30, 35 yards after contact tells me he's going to fight for every yard. And that's why it's so imperative not just to have that spy on him, keep that contained, but make sure you also wrap him up, because we still have seen a little bit of struggle, nowhere near as much as we've seen over the past few years with missed tackling and things like that. But, some things you still want to clean up. And that certainly would be an area for me where not just containing him, but continuing to wrap up and finishing tackles. That would be where I'd go with that.
So I like where you're going with that, because as I look at it, I was really impressed with the open field tackling. I think especially when you look at what Devin Bryant and Alex McLaughlin brought to the table in that department, the open field tackling was really, really solid for the most part. But where I think the biggest test for defensive coordinator Ryan Walters is, and we'll get to the run defense in a second, but I think it comes more to, kind of as you said, we've seen Washington struggle over the last handful of years with mobile quarterbacks. So finding ways to keep him in the pocket. And I just think that's why I kind of prefaced everything the way I did, where if that's the plan of attack, I think you're going to be happy with just going about things that way, because if you're forcing him to just make tough, tight window throws into man coverage, that's going to be something that, for any quarterback, that's going to be really, really tough. So as I look at Caden Pinnick, especially for being a redshirt freshman, that's something that could really cause him problems against this really experienced UW secondary. So finding ways to just make him one-dimensional is going to be a really, really big part of this. And if Ryan Walters can pass that test, I feel like fans are going to be, generally looking in the right direction. I feel like we're going to hear a lot of, hey, it's an FCS opponent in UC Davis. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But at the same time, if things are heading in the right direction, I feel like, that's going to be a minor feather in the cap of Ryan Walters.
This really strikes me as the Eastern Michigan game last season, where Steve Belichick was 35-3, I think I want to say, somewhere in that ballpark. Or which game was it that it was almost
34-3 was the final score, I believe. Yeah.
And I think this is an example of where good team, good test, but if you answer it correctly, this could be that kind of not linchpin or hallmark game, but just one that Ryan Walters can say, that's what you expect from my defense, even against a Big Ten team or against a Power 5 team, not just an FCS team, because we fully expect Ryan Walters to be able to dial up the right plan. But as you touched on a little bit there, it's not just Caden Pinnick, it's also that entire kind of rushing attack, if you will, for UC Davis, because they don't have just one. They don't really have just two. There's like 3 or 4 guys, including Caden, that you could quantify as saying, hey, these are true running threats. Obviously, it starts with Jordan Fisher, but you just go through that room, and to me, they use all 3 backs. They've used all 3 in week 1 and week 2. So that tells me, okay, you're not just preparing for one. You're really going to be committed to they're going to be establishing the run, which to me speaks to you have that depth along the defensive line. For the love of God, show it.
So let's talk about the defensive line, and especially in the run game, where everydayers have been on our comments all week saying, hey, I'm really concerned about this. I'm really concerned about the defensive line. Lars, off the top of your head, do you remember how many rushing yards Colorado State had at the end of the game?
So you asked me a different question. I'm going to say like 75, but I know it was
85. Yeah, no, you're in the right ballpark. It's 85, 87. How many of those came after the first quarter?
That was the question you asked me. And I think I will still give my answer, but I think 40, 50 something. And I know it was less than that. Yeah.
14. So I think that this needs to be, just expanded on, obviously. But I look at this defensive line, and especially when you listen to Ryan Walters, Devin Bryant, Jacob Lane, they all talked about this with us earlier in the week. And they said one of the biggest reasons that we looked unprepared to stop the run, why they had 71 rushing yards in the first quarter, was they threw a lot of stuff at us that they didn't show on film and installed, obviously, I don't know if it's going to be something that carries out for the entire season for Colorado State, or they install things like this to beat a Ryan Walters defense, which is where I'm going with this. I'm very curious to see how UC Davis wants to attack this Ryan Walters defense. I want to see if it's, we look at the Colorado State film and these are things that beat them. And, maybe these aren't things that we use every week, but let's install a couple of these plays and see how Washington might react to a couple different things that we don't necessarily, utilize on film every week. And installing things like that game week can be really difficult. So this is why I think I want to see how this plays out. But, credit to Ryan Walters and that defensive coaching staff for making the adjustments that need be after the first quarter and really limiting the Colorado State rushing attack. And I just want to see that start at the beginning of the game this week, where even if there are some things that you're unprepared for, it's on these linebackers, it's on these safeties to come downhill and run support and fill gaps like they are supposed to.
Yeah, and I think that's something where you have the talent, whether it's Devin Bryant, Budaluta, Exree Alexander. We can run through the names as we have done for the past 3 or 4 months now on the show. All the talent is there for games like this to shine in a number of different categories. And to me, I think this is where we saw Alex McLaughlin really shine week 1. Who is going to be the Alex McLaughlin of this defense week 2? I would probably quantify and say Budaluta. You could probably pick Alex and a couple other guys. I think just that to me is like, let it shine through, because if you have another not question mark game, but you get the win, but you're still giving up, let's say 17, 21 points, now you're going to have more questions than answers, even going into an early bye week.
I'm laughing because I have a bold prediction about that of who is going to, be the big play guy. So we'll get there in a few minutes. Stick around for that to all you everydayers out there. But I like where you're going with that, because, you talk about giving up 17 or 21 points. I don't know if that should necessarily be the standard, because, let's say 14 points come in the fourth quarter when you want to throw Dominic Macon, Caleb Smith, and a couple of those other guys out there to get a few drives in. Like, I feel like that's well within the realm of possibilities. And, maybe it turns into 2023 Cal, where people are like, hey, Cal put up 32 points on Washington. And it's how many of those points and yards came in the fourth quarter? Like that is something that is, certainly very possible. But I look at this defense overall, and I am very encouraged about where it's going. It needs to prove it against Big Ten teams. But if you can just continue to build on the success you had following the first quarter last week, I feel like we're going to, just feel a lot better about where this team is, following a potential win over UC Davis, again, to hint at your score prediction there. And with that being said, let's jump into it because we're very excited about these bold predictions. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Upside. Hey, Locked On Huskies fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use our limited time promo code FOOTBALL and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now by using our limited time free promo code FOOTBALL for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code FOOTBALL. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, build on a same game parlay, my personal favorite, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Normally, I forget who's supposed to go first in these bold predictions, but I know for a fact that you went first last week. So it's my turn to get us kicked off here. And I'm very excited about this one because as we were prepping and being like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about going with. You jumped on here and you said, hey, I think Dezmen Roebuck scores his first touchdown. And I said, hey man, that was the first thing I wrote down when I wanted to do this. So, I think we can chalk this up as a point for both of us if it does come to fruition. Shout out to me, by the way. I'm going to toot my own horn here. I know I got at least 2 of my 3 bold predictions right last week. But I look at this and I think that this is a really interesting opportunity because we didn't mention it earlier on, kind of wanted to talk about it right now, which is why Omari Evans, the senior Penn State transfer wide receiver, will not be playing this week after Jedd Fisch told us on Monday that he practiced on Sunday, looked like he was on track to play this week with what he called a soft tissue injury. On Thursday, during his press conference, he walked it back and said he doesn't expect him to play, and they're holding him out, with the bye week coming up before the Washington State game. I feel like, that's going to be a big reason why there. So I got Dezmen Roebuck scoring his first career touchdown, and I think this is something where I was going to go with either him or Raiden Vinesbright. I wanted to go with one of them, and Raiden looked really solid in terms of route running. I know he didn't get any targets in the game, but I liked what I saw from him. But Dezmen Roebuck, man, as we continue to talk about throughout fall camp, he just has that ability to find space and get open no matter what coverage is playing, no matter who he's going up against. He has found ways to make plays. And I feel like in a game like this, especially later on in the contest, we're probably going to see him working with Kai Horton, again, considering your score prediction comes true. And this is one of those games where whether it be from DeMond or Kai Horton, I think Dezmen Roebuck is finding the end zone in this game.
See, I'm glad you phrased it that way because I was going to say the bold prediction would be from DeMond Williams, not Kai Horton. Honestly, I could see a first half touchdown from Roebuck. I mean, that to me is where he's at already. I know that sounds crazy because of the guys in that room you're picking, Raiden would be probably more likely the first just based on perception. If you told me 6 months ago which freshman receiver gets a touchdown first, probably would have been Raiden, maybe a couple.
I probably would have said Chris Lawson, to be honest with you.
Well, again, if all considered healthy, yes, I'd probably would have. I would have picked Chris Lawson. I would be on the agenda for the team there. But I think from what we've seen from Dezmen, I like that a lot. One other route that I want to go with is sticking on the offensive side of the ball here. And I'm going to caveat it with saying offensive because I did kind of tease before the show that it would be total touchdowns or just overall touchdown. But I think Jordan Washington finds himself in the end zone. But I think it might be a receiving touchdown, not a rushing touchdown.
Ooh,
so
okay.
that to me, where this could be a 4 touchdown game for DeMond, maybe 5. And I think that to me is where, when we get into some of these other breakdown stats here, Jordan Washington, definitely a sneaky player to watch, for playing as your beloved fantasy sports, a sleeper pick, if you will.
No, I do like where you're going with that. I went with a different route here where I kind of wanted to just say, all right, who do I think is going to break out in this game? Because this is one of those games where, as I mentioned earlier on, you want to get your stars involved early and often, but you still want to make sure you're spreading the ball around, doing a whole lot of different things. So I feel a 100-yard game coming, but I did not write down Denzel Boston's name. I think we're going to see a 100-yard game for Rashid Williams. I feel like this very much can qualify for a bold prediction because it would be his first career 100-yard game. And I added a caveat here of 7 catches. I think he's going to just really get peppered with targets early on in the game. And as it continues to roll on, if he's a guy who stays in there for a little bit, assuming Kai Horton does come into the ball game at some point, that can just stay on the field for a little while and just get, a little bit more ingrained in the offense and the playbook and just get that feel, especially after, not taking a whole lot of snaps during his first 2 years on campus. So he's someone who I really like as a whole, just in terms of what he brings to the field. And I feel like this is the kind of game where a lot like we saw, reference the Eastern Michigan game again, like you did, a lot like we saw Jeremiah Hunter get really, really involved in that game after we didn't see very much of him in week 1. Rashid Williams, 4 catches for 27 yards. I feel like you can do a lot to just kind of get him going a little bit further downfield, maybe get him a few plays where it's just schemed up to have him pick up some yards after the catch. So I like Rashid a lot. I'm really excited to see what he can be by the end of the season. And I think that it's going to start I was going to say today, on Saturday.
I mean, they might as well start today with the walkthroughs and things like that. But I like that a lot. And I think the other thing to consider that is Denzel could really help some of the younger guys lining up alongside. So if you have, let's say you have a 2 or 3 receiver set of Roebuck, Bright, and Denzel Boston, Denzel is probably drawing the best coverage of those 3, which should allow one of the other 2 to get open. And I think that's where this really factors in for the young guys. And even Rashid, you can throw him in that same breath, because when somebody else attracts that attention, somebody else is going to produce. And I think any of those 3 guys, or even Decker DeGraff, I do kind of want to throw him as a caveat in here. I think he could be another guy to watch on offense this week. As not necessarily a breakout star, but just if he has, call it 5 catches for 60 yards with or without a touchdown, that's another guy to me where if he proves to be DeMond's security blanket as that go-to second option behind Denzel, this might be that game to establish it. But I do want to switch to the defensive side of the ball because you're going to like this bold prediction a lot. And I did not tell it to you pregame. Rylan Dillard Allen gets his first turnover, and I really want to say it's going to be a pick 6, but I don't want to go that bold because we saw it in a lot of games. But I do think he will have a significant return to whichever fumble or interception return he has Saturday.
Okay, I love predictions like that, especially for a guy like that as a true freshman. I was laughing a lot earlier because, like you said, we like to just react to these in the moment. It's a lot of fun. Just give Dave Verdeers a peek behind the curtain here. I only have one defensive prediction, and I know you're going to like it because you were literally just talking about it. I have Alex McLaughlin as the team's leading tackler with 10 plus tackles. Plus, I added a caveat in here of 2 pass breakups in this game. He's a guy where, we've already seen him play at the FCS level for 2 years. So if there's anybody who knows what's going to be going on a lot, and, we talked to Jedd Fisch about him a lot over fall camp and everything. And you talk to a lot of people about him and they say he's really cerebral. He's a football junkie. Just a lot of that where he's watching a lot of film. And one of the big reasons I'm going with this is because this is a team Alex McLaughlin has played before and made plays. We went back and we're checking some of the PFF numbers where ESPN doesn't provide total tackles for FCS teams. And Alex McLaughlin had 4 tackles, a PBU, and a 57-yard interception return when he played UC Davis as a true freshman. Now, I know different quarterback and everything, but this is a team he has seen before. And, like I was saying, he likes to study film. He likes to do all of the, the preparation stuff. And Jedd Fisch and Taylor Mays and Ryan Walters have all praised him endlessly for that. So if he comes out and has a big game against a school he has seen before, I'm not going to be shocked.
No, and we're kind of caveating to tell us together. Jordan Fisher, the running back for UC Davis, lead back, was in that game and did have a significant, kind of contribution in that game as well. So Alex knows how to read the run, knows how to read the pass. I think he's a guy where I don't know if it's been established who has the green headset on this team or the green dot on this team, but if Alex gets it at some point, I wouldn't make sense if it's Buddha, but I would not be surprised if at some point, either this season or certainly next season as a senior, he's the green dot just because of everything you mentioned with him being so cerebral and just his leadership qualities in general, kind of just leading by example in that respect. I think it's worth pointing out that when Washington wins this game 38-10.
Okay, so that's a score prediction.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to kind of tease that there. I just want to throw that in there, sneak it in a little bit. But there's going to be multiple turnovers.
Okay.
I really am curious, though, what happens on special teams, because I have a really interesting feeling. Maybe that Jordan Washington prediction that I had, maybe it is a total touchdown on special teams as well. So I think this is a game where Jedd can get creative. It's unfortunately another 8 p.m. game. So I think Jedd may have learned, try to spice it up a little bit and get the guys going earlier on, because that seemed to kind of, carry some weight a little bit, if you will.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. We got so much more fun stuff coming for you throughout the season. So please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Well, that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell, so you know when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. It does help the program out a lot. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And with that being said, we'll talk to you after the game.